of the divestment of apartments owned by the NIF at Point Village Resort in Negril, and that process will go to the regular tender process as established by government rules. There was also the approval of amendments to the Harbours Act, the amendments of Section 2 of the Act in order to define the authority referred to as the Port Authority. Previously, it was not so defined. And there's also the decision of Cabinet on the development of a national employment policy by the Office of the Prime Minister, and will ensure several modalities in the engagement of workers, and will also target youth who are not academically qualified but still trainable. We also had the award of contracts for the construction of 12 two-bedroom units at Victoria Street, Kingston 14, the renewal of Human Employment and Resource Training National Service Training Agency Group Health Insurance Services. We also had the appointment of additional members to boards. Well, not additional, they have replaced others. Ms. Darlene Morrison, CD, chairperson of the Capital Development Fund Managing Committee. We also had the appointment of Mr. Delroy Hunter to the Jamaica Tertiary Commission, Tertiary Transformation Steering Committee, as well as Mr. Dennis Morgan, chairman of the Port Security Corps Limited. Those are some of the decisions and some considerations that were made by Cabinet. I would now open the floor to take questions from members of the media who are present.
Morning again, Jamila Maitland from TVJ. There has been a lot of concern surrounding, security guards. What is the government's policy as it relates to private security companies and the issues concerning paying over taxes that have been deducted from their salaries? Is the government actively ensuring that these companies adhere to some of whatever it is that they are grounded in in the contract approval, in the contract, approving their contracts? Are they paying over these NIS, their NHD in due time? Thanks.
It's kind of challenging to answer a question because it wasn't based on a specific case. So then I'll have to answer it in a general sense. Employers do have an obligation to pay over all deductions taken on behalf of employees, security guards included. There have been other incidents in companies, not just restricted to the security industry, where deductions are not paid over. And I think that there are legal remedies to security guards, and I know that if it comes to the knowledge that these deductions are not being paid over, then obviously action can be taken. But it's very challenging for me to respond specifically to a general question. Do we have another question?
Everybody hearing me? Minister, was the Attorney General consulted before the appointment of Lieutenant General Rocky Meade?
Thank you for that question. That question is outside of my remit. I am not a part of the Public Service Commission. I was not a part of the process. You would be aware of the process through which it's very challenging. It's very challenging. It's very challenging. No, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Are we ready again? Thank you very much. I cannot answer a question like that because it's not the remit of me, of myself, to engage in the process of the appointment or be connected to the appointment of the Cabinet Secretary. That is the Public Service Commission through the Office of the Governor General. So I would not be able to participate in that conversation.
but know that it has been said that the appointment was breaching Section 92.1
said by
of
who?
Several constitutional
But
lawyers.
I am not a constitutional lawyer.
Well, have you know, or has the cabinet now consulted the Attorney General?
The
to see
position
appointment
is, the position is that the matter regarding this issue is a settled matter. There is no outstanding issue to be dealt with. The media is free to do their investigations and ask questions, but based on what I have seen in the public domain, I don't see any other issues. There were issues raised. The gentleman withdrew his position from the position, or the offer of the position, and it's now the government's and the government system's obligation to engage in a process to appoint a cabinet secretary. I cannot go beyond that curtain to articulate anything else other than that. Come on.
Minister, we have not heard from the government since what some have called the botched appointment. We have not heard anything from the government. So I'm asking you.
There were 2 press releases issued. There was a press release that spoke about the proposed appointment on October the 1st. There was a press release, a statement from a gentleman saying that based on public discussions, he will not be accepting any such offer. There has been no constituted authority that has pronounced on the opinions of the persons that you quoted. And it would be highly inappropriate of me.
So no,
Would you allow me to finish? Would you allow me to finish? You asked a question. I did not interrupt you.
Okay.
Thank you. I could not pronounce on what a constitutional lawyer says. I can't pronounce on that opinion. As it relates to the process that was engaged or not engaged, that is outside of the frame of a cabinet minister, as that process has been structured to prevent a cabinet minister from interfering in the process. There are other constituted authorities who have the authority to manage such a process. And I suspect that you may want to engage them to get the answers which you seek. Hold on for me a second. You have asked the same question 3 times, and the answer is going to be the same. The government's position is that there was a proposed appointment. The person who was offered the position has decided, based on conversations in the public questioning the constitutionality, that he will not take the appointment up. Based on all those actions, the matter has been closed. That's the answer.
Okay. Has Cabinet made any determination on further postponement?
Cabinet has not discussed the matter. Cabinet has not discussed the matter. Are there any other questions?
Poll has shown that the JLP is leading by 13 percentage points. Is the government comforted by this lead, or is it an indication that there is more work to be done?
There's always more work to be done. A poll is a snapshot in time based on the perspectives and perceptions of the public. But as a government, we cannot be wedded to that. We have an agenda which we need to execute. We have policies and programs. Some have started, some have not yet started. Some are very mature in their execution. And we have to focus on that. The government recognizes the positive rating of persons. But there's also issues that the polls have unearthed that the government has to contemplate deeply and has been contemplating deeply. So the short answer to your question is that yes, we see the polls, yes, we see the positive rating, but we have a lot of work to do, and we will continue doing that work.
Prince Moore, Radio Jamaica News.
Thank you, Prince.
Minister, the sixth form pathways program. There were concerns about it, with some school administrators expressing that there is a need for additional resources. Has the program started? And talk to us about the enrollment of the students in the program, and also, is it mandatory?
So I don't have the specific numbers today, and I can get that to you, Prince, about the quantum of students who have enrolled. What I can say to you, based on the reviews that we've had, is that it has been a very successful rollout of the program. And I think I want to spend some time, based on where I previously sat, to give you an understanding of why there was a need for that program. It is accepted nationally, based on the reports, the recent partisan report and reports previous, that we have a challenge in the education system with students who participate in the system from Form 1 to 5, and at the end of Form 5 do not acquire whether skills or academic qualifications to prepare them for the working world. It is in that vein that the government decided long ago to give students an opportunity through various pathways, not just academics, but also skills training and vocational training, to engage the education system for a further 2 years. That was allowed because the Education Act originally said that school leaving age was about 18. So there was no issue from a legislative perspective as to whether or not the sixth form program could work. One of the concerns raised by stakeholders was the issue of space. When the Ministry of Education did their assessment, they found that we had over 20,000 spaces within the education system that could be used for the pathway. These were not just restricted to high schools, but they were also in tertiary institutions. And that is why we engaged tertiary institutions, and a lot of the tertiary institutions came on board. The issue as it relates to space was not an issue that we felt was at a particular level that would cause the project to stall or not be effective. What it required was for a partnership between the government, the public education system, and the tertiary level institutions to move students from various original institutions to these tertiary institutions. Based on the pictures that we're seeing and based on the reports we're seeing from schools all across the island, thousands of students have taken up the opportunity. We were at a town hall recently at Jamaica College where parents got up and raised concerns that their child was not able to participate. So the parents want the students to get the opportunity. The government wants the students to get the opportunity. A majority of institutions want the students to get the opportunity. And the government has also provided the resources in terms of grants, in terms of further assistance to both the tertiary institutions and also the secondary institutions to accommodate these students. In any project that you're doing, especially in an environment such as the education system that has a myriad of stakeholders, a myriad of interests, you're going to have questions, which is a good thing, because what it did is gave the government an opportunity. Even though we knew that the idea at its nucleus was good, it gave us the opportunity to look back at it and make adjustments. And I think those adjustments have benefited the students this year. But there will be further adjustments as we continue to engage with the stakeholders to make it even better next year. The pathways are mandatory in the sense that you must leave school with qualifications, but it doesn't mean that if I am in fifth form and I get 9 subjects, that I am forced to go to sixth form. I can go to another institution. I can go to the UTech or so on. The mandatoriness of it is basically saying we want all our students to leave high school with something that will give them the opportunity to matriculate to a higher level, whether it is to participate in the working environment or whether it is to go on to further studies. Do we have any other questions?
Follow up to what you said to me about the pools. You said that
The polls.
the poll.
Okay.
Yes, you said it unearthed issues within the government that needs to be addressed. Could you possibly share what are some of those issues that it unearthed?
I mean, I think everybody knows that the issue of crime is something that is in front of us. It is at the top of government's consciousness, both at the cabinet level and in the parliamentary level. You have seen the tabling of the new Firearms Act, which is a response to the evolution of gun crime within the society. You have seen, as Minister stated, we're looking at the Bail Act, we're looking at the Enhanced Security Measures Law to come. And I think that members of the public, fairly so, whenever we have things like that happen in St. Catherine, when we have things that happen in places like my community in North Central Clarendon, are very concerned. And they should be concerned. And the polls show that. The issue of the economy is also something that concerns people. We are going through a global economic crisis, predicated not because of things that we have done locally, but because of things that are happening on a global scale. The issues related to logistics, how quickly can goods travel from country to country, has inhibited trade and has increased prices. The issue of inflation internationally, because Jamaica is an island and a lot of our products are imported, has also impacted locally. When a consumer goes to the shop and has to pay a higher price for a commodity that we imported, it impacts us as a government, because government is not a nebulous. I'm sorry. What an interesting morning, isn't it? So government is not this nebulous entity that is uncaring. We go to the shops too. Our families take public transportation. We buy gas. I recently bought gas for my vehicle, and I stood there for a while looking at the price. So we are impacted too. And we see the polls and we recognize it for what it is. It's a barometer of how people feel. And it is our obligation as a government to watch and listen and respond accordingly to issues that are impacting the people. Thank you. Pardon? 2 more questions. All right, thank you.
Has the development order for the change of use to housing on some of the Innswood lands been formally and officially rescinded, or is it merely that the Cabinet has taken a policy decision not to switch focus from agriculture?
I think I'm very happy that you raised that question, because there has been a lot of misinformation and disinformation about the Innswood property. When we were doing the highways, the previous government engaged in a process of converting the nature and use of lands in that area from just agricultural to agricultural and housing. The research will show that there have been thousands of houses that have been built in and around that area. The change of Innswood from strictly agriculture to housing did not begin. Naomi, could you? Thank you. The change of housing did not begin with the Andrew Holness administration. And that's something that has not been said. When we decided that we wanted to start the mother farming concept, there was knowledge that the property had 2 potential uses based on the regulations. But the government made a policy decision that we want this property to be used for farming. That policy decision that was made in 2018, 2019 has never changed. It has never shifted. There's been no discussion in the cabinet about changing Innswood, that 3,000 thereabout acre property, from agriculture to housing, though previously it was zoned for both. So the straight answer to your question is, and I keep saying it, I've said it on radio, I've said it other places, the government of Jamaica is fully committed to those lands being restricted to farming and production. I do not know how else to put it. I do not know how clearer the government needs to be on it. I know that there are stakeholders who are concerned, and they have a right to be concerned, and we appreciate their concerns. But our duty is to speak clearly and to articulate the government's policy in as open a fashion as possible. And the policy is, and the policy has been since the mother farm concept came aboard. And the reason why the lease that the company got said exclusively for agricultural production, it did not say in 5 years you can build a house on it. It said exclusively. And even the person whose company possesses the lease has come out very clearly and said that he never had any intention of changing the farmland to housing. So if the government, which granted the lease and makes policy, says only farming, the person who has possession of the lease or benefits from the lease says only farming. And there's been no evidence since the mother farm concept has come about of a change in government policy. And it's a bit challenging for me, Kimon, to appreciate where this information is coming from. Lease to own does not mean that you can change it. It doesn't. There's a stipulation in the lease that says you have the option to purchase. But you cannot, even if you purchase, you cannot just build without approvals. And there has been no application by the company that has leased the land to purchase the land. Thank you very much.
Jamila from TVJ. Has a timeline been given by the Commission, that's the Civil Service Commission, to comfortably select a next postcard, a next cabinet secretary?
You're asking me questions, Jamila, that are outside of
Cabinet
my
would be
remit.
aware of a timeline.
No. You see, we have to be very careful how we interfere in constituted authorities, you know. There is a constituted authority appointed by the Governor General that has awesome power in making these determinations. A government minister or cabinet would be inappropriate to interfere or intervene in that process. So when you ask me questions like that, I find it challenging for me because any answer I give may signal to the public that I am unwilling to answer. But it's not an unwillingness to answer, it's an inability to answer. Not an inability because I am unable to get the information, but an inability because it is outside of the remit that I have been allowed to participate in.
To that timeline?
They would not indicate it to me or the cabinet. They wouldn't. That has never been the tradition. But thank you very much. I suspect that we have exhausted. It has been a long time, and I think we should do this more regularly. No, the floor has always been open. I mean, we're not restricting the questions. We're not restricting the questions. I do not want to be accused that I have cut off questions by certain media houses. I'm not calling any names.
The PM's recent travel to the Queen's funeral, we would like to know the cost for that.
That happened 2 days ago.
Yeah, but would it have been approved?
That would be in the cabinet minutes, I think, of a week ago. So I would not have that yet. But there's no issue in revealing that. I mean, it wasn't a... So you have to remember how it happened. We had planned UNGA, United Nations General Assembly, and then the intervening act was the death of the Queen. And we had to make a decision, should we go to UNGA or should we participate? We have a very strong relationship with Britain, other than the fact that the Queen is constitutionally, was our sovereign. The fact of the matter is, this is an international engagement where hundreds of heads of states have been invited. So the decision was made that Jamaica should participate in the ceremony. Normal diplomatic engagement as well. So that's how it came about.
One more. Did the PM satisfy himself that it was constitutional before making the recommendation to the Governor General?
I've already answered that question.
I know. I don't know that you have. I just asked the question, Minister.
Tell Andre that I've already answered that question.
All right. Was it the Prime Minister who asked the OSC to invite?
I've already answered that question. But you know what I like about you? You're resilient. You're like the government. You're very resilient. Do we have a final question, Naomi?
Minister, would you be able to say what the enrollment is like in schools coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think it's over 95%. The challenge we have is not the challenge we have. The challenge we have as a country is not necessarily the standard regular enrollment of students. The issue is locating every single student who wasn't engaged in the system through the pandemic. And I don't know if you remember, but Minister Williams started a yard-to-yard child find initiative where we actually went house to house to seek to find these students. I think we found everyone except about probably over 1,000 of them. So if you know, the education system pretty much has about 600,000 students in it. A majority of them were engaged in some form of modality, whether it was mixed modality, face-to-face with virtual, or learning kits, or so on. So a majority of the 600,000 students who were a part of the system for the 2 years would have engaged in some sort of engagement with the education system. But in some very peculiar cases, there were students who we couldn't locate, and we've located a majority of them. School is on. Schools are functioning as they should. Teachers are engaged. Our reports is that the issues that were raised previously relates to teacher migration and so forth. Majority of those were resolved as they were expected to be resolved based on the amount of teachers coming into the system being more than teachers leaving the system. A dilemma that we face, though, is that we seem to be graduating more teachers than the education system is able to accommodate. So if you have a resignation level or a leaving level of 500 and you're graduating 900, and I think that's the bigger conversation that we need to have. Do we have enough spaces for teachers leaving teachers' college and universities? And it's a pity that we never had that conversation, because I think that's the bigger conversation that we should talk about. Thank you very much.
Minister, just one quick one. There were protests at Godfrey Stewart recently regarding the whole uniform policy, and the minister had come out and said that she is sticking by the school administration, schools policy. What's the government position on this, and do you think it is sending a
around that? So I had to do some investigation as well on the Godfrey Stewart matter. What we found was that there was not a really locking out of any student. What happened was, and we discussed it at cabinet, there was a student, like one you just raised earlier, who was disconnected from the system, couldn't be located, did not participate in virtual learning, did not participate in mixed modality. The school decided that the child could not matriculate to a higher level. The child had to go back to a previous level. A parent was dissatisfied with that decision, and there was a a conflict between the parent and the administration. The parent engaged other parents who decided to protest the issue. That was a separate issue from the question of grooming. Grooming in schools, based on the regulations, is determined by the PTA and the school. So there has to be a consensus based on the current rules between the Parent Teachers Association and the schools as it relates to grooming. Whether we agree with what Godfrey Stewart has done or not is really immaterial in the sense, because the PTA, which is the parents and the student and the schools, agreed that this is the standard that we want. I may not agree with it, government may not agree with it, of a particular level of autonomy based on and I want you to give me the breath to explain, based on the current regulations. So the PTA and the school decided that this is how we want our students to dress. They also said students who are unable to afford this mode of dress, we will purchase uniforms for them. So there was not really a conflict per se based on all the investigations that we have done, because it went to the highest level in the country, on the dress, because the Parent Teachers Association had already made arrangements for students who would come to school inappropriately just based on their standards. That doesn't mean we agree or disagree. What it means is that there's an established process based on the regulations that the government has to respect. And the minister, in her articulation of the matter, basically said that we have to respect the process of the school. The school is in charge of discipline and managing the plant. The other point, and I think this is the important point, is because of exactly these sort of issues where we're currently in public consultations on a national grooming policy. When I was Minister of State there, we ran through a whole process of determining what is appropriate grooming, because we realized that we cannot continue having these sorts of conflicts and miscommunications and misunderstanding, which really distract from the purpose of school. The purpose of school is not about your hair or your shoes or your clothes. Your purpose of school is your education. So the government is actually, and you probably would have heard the advertisements, engaging with stakeholders, teachers, parents, church schools, traditional schools, non-traditional schools, on a national grooming policy. And that is a collaboration between the Ministry of Culture and Gender, Minister Grange, as well as Favour Williams. So I suspect that within another few months, there will be a standardized approach to grooming nationally, which will mitigate against conversations like this taking place. But I want to reiterate that a lot of what was promulgated in the public about the issue, based on our investigation, was not factual. Doesn't mean that the government is saying that parents and members of the public should not be concerned about what took place. But I think we have an obligation, because I saw a Gleaner editorial today, which I felt could have benefited a little bit more from the information that is out there. But the concerns raised are valid concerns that we should contemplate. Thank you very much. I suspect we've exhausted our box of questions. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a while. Thank you for attending. Thanks to members of the media. Thanks to the GIS team. And thanks to the team here at OPM for assisting us. We were on time this morning, 9 to 10, and I suspect that we'll be on time going forward. So on behalf of the entire OPM team, and thanks to members of the public for tuning in, and have a wonderful, safe day. Thank you.
Hey you, yes you. Let's go on a public sector journey together. Check your rear view and lit the gas. We all rely on public sector workers, from hospitals and care workers to schools, where our children get the education in emergency situations when we're most in need. In turn, public sector workers are paid by us. The current compensation structure in the public sector is complex, inconsistent, and inequitable. That's about to change. Welcome to the new compensation system. The new system is simple and easily understood. It's consistent, enabling equitable application and transparency across the public sector. It will reward high performance, and it's sustainable. The government of Jamaica is committed to investing in its people and building a better public sector for
Good afternoon, boys and girls. My name is Keelan Goburn. Our co-host is Mr. Marcus Green. Welcome to another exciting week of physical education. Okay, so if you notice, for the last couple of weeks, we have been looking at different areas of physical education. We looked at aspects of track and field, we looked at aspects of football, and last week we started looking into cricket. Just to recap, last week we looked at batting, different aspects of batting in cricket. This week we are going to introduce bowling